I still remember the message that morning. Can we move your interview to the Hilton across the street? I've got back-to-back meetings today. It looked professional enough. The company email signature was there, the tone polite. I didn't question it. Not really. This was my third interview for a position I dreamed of since college. I told myself flexibility made me look eager, adaptable. But as I crossed the busy street toward the hotel lobby, something in my stomach twisted. It wasn't intuition yet, just a quiet discomfort I didn't have the confidence to name. Inside, the air smelled of coffee and polished wood. I checked my reflection in the brass mirror near the elevators, blazer crisp, folder in hand, smile rehearsed. I looked like someone about to start a career. When the elevator doors opened, he was already waiting, tall, confident, the kind of person who always looked like the room belonged to him. "Thanks for coming on such short notice," he said. "Let's talk somewhere quieter." He led me down the hallway, past meeting rooms with glass walls, past open lounges where executives worked on laptops. We stopped at a closed door. I noticed the small plastic sleeve with a keycard blinking red. "Conference rooms were all booked," he said quickly. "We can chat here, just need privacy." I hesitated. My heartbeat tapped against my folder like a second hand on a clock. But I followed. Because what else do you do when you're 26, unemployed, and trying to be taken seriously? The room smelled faintly of cologne and air conditioning. He gestured toward a small table near the window. "Have a seat. Don't look so nervous." I smiled, the automatic polite kind that women are taught to give when something feels wrong but you can't prove it. He started with easy questions: my background, what drew me to the company, what I thought about leadership. My answers came smoothly. I'd practiced them enough times to whisper in my sleep. Then his tone shifted. He leaned back in the chair, eyes narrowing. "You're smart," he said. "You've got potential. But sometimes success isn't just about what's on paper. It's about how you connect with people." I felt my stomach tighten again. I forced another smile. "I believe in teamwork," I said carefully. "Communication is important." He chuckled, a low sound that made my pulse climb. "Exactly. Chemistry." For a heartbeat, the air froze. Then I said, "I'm confident my results would speak for themselves." He didn't reply, just studied me, as if measuring how far he could push before I broke. I realized then that this wasn't an interview anymore. It was an audition for compliance. I excused myself to the restroom. My hands were trembling as I texted my friend. He moved the interview to a hotel room. "Something feels off." Her reply came instantly. "Get out. Now." I stood there, looking at myself in the mirror. My reflection didn't look scared. It looked furious. I thought about the months I'd spent searching, the polite rejections, the way every door seemed to open just wide enough for someone else. When I stepped back into the hallway, I didn't go back to the room. I went straight to the lobby, heart racing, but steps steady. I left him sitting there with his questions unanswered. That night, I wrote everything down: the email, the texts, the timestamps. It wasn't courage yet, just documentation. But it was the first page of something bigger. The day I decided my voice mattered more than any job title. For the first few days after that interview, I tried to pretend nothing had happened. That's what I'd been trained to do: swallow the discomfort, iron it flat, move forward. It's how women survive in corporate spaces that weren't designed for them. But silence has a sound. It hums. It vibrates at the edge of your day, in every unread email, every "will be in touch," every polite smile that feels like it's hiding something. 3 days later, I received a message from the company's HR department. "We've decided to move forward with another candidate. Thank you for your time." That was it. No explanation, no feedback, just a clean, professional goodbye. I stared at the screen for a long time, the words blurring together. I wasn't angry yet. I was numb. Then, the whispering started. A friend who worked in the same building called me one evening. "Hey," she said, her voice low. "I heard something weird today. Someone mentioned your name, said you'd been unprofessional during an interview." Unprofessional. It felt like a slap, even through the phone. That word had weight. It meant untrustworthy. It meant problem. It meant don't hire her. For 2 nights, I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw his face. Calm, confident, untouchable. I imagined him laughing about it over coffee, rewriting the story to fit his comfort. By the end of that week, I decided I couldn't stay quiet anymore. I gathered every piece of evidence, the email he sent moving the interview, the text with the hotel address, the time-stamped messages to my friend. My hands shook as I put them into a folder titled Interview March 12. It wasn't rage that pushed me. It was exhaustion from years of pretending that these things just happen. I drafted an email to HR. Not accusing, not dramatic, just facts. I told them where the interview had taken place, what was said, and how I felt. Before hitting send, I hesitated. What if they didn't believe me? What if they called it a misunderstanding? That's when I remembered the look in his eyes that day, the confidence of a man who knew he'd never be questioned. I clicked send. The reply came 2 days later. Thank you for bringing this to our attention. We will conduct an internal review. It was formal, detached, but I'd expected that. What I didn't expect was what followed. The sudden flood of silence. No recruiters called, no responses to my applications. Even a friend from another department stopped replying to my texts. That's when I realized silence wasn't the absence of sound. It was a message. He was powerful, connected, and I had challenged him. But here's the thing about silence. It can crush you, or it can become the space where you rebuild your voice. One night, I reopened that folder. I added a new document, a statement, detailed and precise. I sent it not just to HR, but to the company's ethics line, to the regional director, to every address I could find. I expected fallout. I expected fear. What I didn't expect was how many others would start writing back. I had a similar experience with him. He tried that with me last year. I thought I was the only one. That's when I knew my story wasn't an exception, it was a pattern. And for the first time, I wasn't alone. The email replies came slowly, like rain before a storm, quiet, hesitant, one drop at a time. At first, I didn't believe what I was seeing. Messages from women I didn't even know, some from different branches, some from completely different cities. Their stories weren't identical, but the pattern was a casual text after a successful interview, a follow-up meeting that somehow took place outside the office, a suggestion that sometimes being personable helps your chances. It was like hearing echoes of my own humiliation coming from a dozen different mouths, and suddenly, what had felt like my private nightmare began to look like something bigger, something systemic. But when you start pulling at the threads of a system, it doesn't unravel quietly. 3 days after I sent my follow-up complaint, I got a call from HR. Their tone was smooth, rehearsed, like they'd practiced it in front of a mirror. "Hi, thank you again for your courage in coming forward. We'd like to invite you to a formal meeting to discuss your concerns in more detail." They said invite, but I knew it wasn't really a choice. I arrived early. The HR conference room was cold, not the kind of cold that comes from air conditioning, but the kind that comes from discomfort. A woman from legal was there, along with 2 HR officers. Their smiles were polite, but their eyes were measuring me. Before we begin, one of them said, "We'd like to remind you that this is a confidential discussion. We want you to feel safe and heard." Safe and heard. The irony nearly made me laugh. I told them everything, every word, every look, every moment from that hotel room. I could hear my own voice trembling, but I refused to let it falter. I described the carpet, the smell of cologne in the air, the exact moment I realized that the interview was never going to be about my qualifications. They wrote notes, lots of notes, but I could tell what they were really doing was calculating how to protect the company, not me. When I finished, one of them leaned forward and asked, "Do you have any evidence that he intended for the meeting to be inappropriate?" I blinked at her. "I just told you he changed the location to his hotel room. Does that sound appropriate to you?" Her pen froze mid-sentence. The silence that followed was the kind that stretches, not because there's nothing left to say, but because everyone knows the next words could be dangerous. When I left the building, the afternoon light felt different, sharper somehow, the kind of brightness that exposes everything. That evening, I got another email. "We have placed the concerned employee on temporary administrative leave pending investigation." Temporary, pending, corporate words for "we'll see if you shut up soon enough." But I didn't. Because by then, I wasn't alone. More messages kept coming in, stories from women who'd been too afraid, too ashamed, too exhausted to speak before. Some had left their jobs, some had stayed and endured. One of them wrote, "He told me I was too emotional for leadership. Now I realize I was just too aware." That line haunted me. I decided to compile everything, every testimony, every text, every email. I created a shared document, private, encrypted, and titled it The List. It wasn't just for me anymore, it was for all of us. A week later, I got a call from a blocked number. It was him. "You've made a mistake," he said, his voice low, calm, deliberate. "You don't know what you're getting yourself into." I remember standing by my window, watching the city lights flicker, feeling something shift inside me. Fear had always been a familiar guest, one that whispered caution and survival. But that night, it felt smaller than the anger sitting beside it. "I know exactly what I'm doing," I said, and hung up. After that, things got messy. Emails stopped arriving. Calls from recruiters suddenly ended halfway through. My social media accounts got flooded with fake comments, things like liar, career climber, attention seeker. And then there was the anonymous email that said, "You should have kept your mouth shut. Nobody likes a troublemaker." I almost deleted it, almost. Instead, I took a screenshot and added it to the list. When you've been silent long enough, your truth becomes a kind of rebellion, and rebellion always gets noticed. 2 weeks later, a journalist reached out. She'd heard whispers of an ongoing internal case involving a senior executive. She asked if I was willing to talk off the record, just to understand. I hesitated. I wasn't ready to become the face of anything. But when she said she'd already spoken to 2 other women and that their stories matched mine, I realized the silence had already broken. We met in a small cafe downtown. She was younger than I expected, sharp-eyed and gentle in the way she asked questions. She didn't push. She listened. And for the first time since that hotel room, I felt like my words landed somewhere safe. That night, as I walked home, the wind felt different. The air was lighter. Not because things were better, but because I knew that finally the truth had started to move. Of course, the company panicked. They released a statement about ongoing investigations and commitment to ethical standards, the corporate way of saying we're caught. But we'll spin this carefully. Internally, I was labeled a potential PR risk. Externally, I became an email thread, a meeting agenda, a whisper in elevators. But behind those walls, something was shifting. Small, quiet, but unstoppable. Because once women start speaking, even a whisper sounds like thunder. I didn't sleep that night. I sat on the floor of my apartment, legs crossed, staring at the blinking light on my laptop, as if it held the answers. My inbox was still open to his last email. "Looking forward to discussing your potential with us." Those words looked different now, soaked in something poisonous. I kept hearing my mother's voice in my head. "Just work hard and you'll be fine." But what happens when hard work isn't what they want from you? What happens when they ask for something else, something you can't give without losing a part of yourself? By morning, I had made a decision. Not the brave kind, not yet. I wasn't ready to file a report, or face him, or even tell anyone what had happened. But I could start somewhere small, by not pretending everything was fine. I showed up at the company the next day, shoulders squared, eyes set forward. My stomach was tight, my pulse loud. Everyone was going about their business. Coffee cups in hand, laughter echoing through the open floor. The world didn't stop for what happened to me. It never does. But I walked straight to HR. The receptionist looked up, surprised. "Can I help you?" "Yes," I said. "I need to report something." It took everything in me not to tremble when I said his name. The HR officer blinked, pen frozen midair. "You're sure you want to make this kind of statement?" He's very senior." "I'm sure," I said, even though my throat felt like sandpaper. They asked me to write everything down. Dates, times, messages. I opened my phone, scrolled through my calendar, my emails, evidence I had avoided looking at. Every line I typed made my heart pound harder. But when I was done, I felt lighter, like I'd exhaled after holding my breath for months. The next few days were chaos. HR called meetings. Whispered conversations followed me down hallways. People avoided my eyes. I overheard things. "She's exaggerating. You know how ambitious she is. There's always 2 sides." Each comment stung, but it also fueled something in me. A quiet, burning defiance. Then came the meeting. They called me into the boardroom, the one with the glass walls and the long table that could seat 20. The HR director sat at the head. My manager was there too, his jaw tight, his expression unreadable. "Let's all stay professional," HR began, voice smooth as marble. "We're here to clarify a misunderstanding." A misunderstanding. I looked at him, the man who had cornered me, who had twisted what was supposed to be a professional conversation into something else. His eyes met mine, full of arrogance. He thought this was a game he'd already won. So I pulled out my phone. I recorded the conversation, I said. You could hear the air shift. He flinched, just barely, but enough. HR froze. The room went silent. I pressed play. His voice filled the room, calm, calculated, unmistakable. "You're smart. You're pretty. I like people who make an effort. We can make this promotion happen if we understand each other." Every syllable landed like a hammer. When the recording ended, no one spoke. The HR director looked pale. My manager looked smaller. "I think," I said quietly, "you understand me now." They suspended him within the hour. The investigation followed. Some people stopped talking to me. Others whispered thank you in the hallways when no one was watching. It wasn't victory, not exactly. It was messy and exhausting and sometimes terrifying, but it was real. And it was mine. Weeks later, as I packed my things, not because I was fired, but because I was leaving on my own terms, I caught my reflection in the glass door. I didn't look the same. My eyes were steadier, my shoulders straighter. The company would replace him, move on, maybe even learn something. But me? I had learned something too, that silence is easy, but truth, once spoken, doesn't go back in the box. People think the hard part is speaking up. It's not. The hard part is everything that comes after. Once the investigation went public inside the company, my inbox turned into a battlefield. Messages from strangers, colleagues, even people I hadn't spoken to in years. Half of them applauded me for my bravery. The other half asked why I hadn't spoken sooner, or what I'd done to lead him on. For weeks I couldn't walk through the lobby without feeling eyes on me. Conversations stopped when I passed. Some smiled too widely, others avoided me entirely. I became the story everyone wanted to tell, but no one wanted to hear from. Still, I kept showing up. I finished my projects. I trained the intern who'd just started, a quiet girl who flinched whenever a man raised his voice in a meeting. I saw myself in her, and that kept me grounded. One morning, HR called me in again. Same room, different faces. They told me he'd resigned. No apology, no explanation, just a clean break and a carefully written company memo about misaligned professional values. I expected relief. What I felt instead was hollow. I walked out of that office, past the rows of cubicles and the fake smiles, and stepped into the sunlight. For the first time in months, I didn't feel trapped under fluorescent lights or under someone's thumb. The air tasted like freedom, bitter and sharp, but real. That night I wrote everything down. Not for HR, not for the company, but for me. Every detail I remembered, every word he'd said, every way I'd minimized it just to keep my job. It poured out of me, the fear, the shame, the anger, the grief. Then I posted it. Not the recording, not the company name, just my story. I hit publish and closed my laptop before I could think twice. By morning it had gone everywhere. Thousands of women and men in the comments, stories eerily similar to mine. People saying thank you for putting into words what they'd never dared to say out loud. Others saying they were finally ready to speak too. My phone buzzed all day. Journalists reached out. Old colleagues apologized. The company issued another memo, this one promising a full review of internal culture. It sounded polished, but I didn't care. The noise was no longer theirs to control. A week later, I got an email from another firm. "We read your story," it said. "We think you'd be a great fit for a new position if you're ready." For the first time, someone saw me not as a problem, but as proof that change was possible. I met with their director in a cafe, open space, bright morning, people everywhere, no closed doors, no keycards, just a genuine conversation about my work, my ideas, my goals. I left that meeting lighter than I'd felt in years. When they offered me the job, I didn't hesitate. On my last day at the old company, I walked through the halls one more time. The same place that had once made me feel small now looked smaller itself, like a set built for a role I'd already outgrown. At my desk, the intern came up to me. She whispered, "Thank you for not staying quiet." I smiled. "Don't ever stay quiet," I said. And as I rode the elevator down, I caught my reflection again in the mirrored doors. Same face, same woman. But this time, I was the one holding the power, not because I'd won some grand victory, but because I hadn't let them rewrite my story. The noise of the lobby faded behind me. The city outside buzzed with life. Somewhere another woman was sitting in a waiting room, rehearsing her answers, trusting that professionalism and talent would be enough. Maybe now, after all this, it would be. Because I spoke, because someone heard, and because silence, once broken, Never sounds the same again.